What is going on, people? It is Michael Seville. It's Community Beacon. It's Friday. Might be a short show, might be a long show, depending on what's going on. We're going to be talking about communication today. And so, what I thought was interesting was I was going to have a list of slides and different things that I was going to put up here for communication on what it is that how I feel about it now, thoughts surrounding it. But then I was like, I know we've done several communication episodes in the past. So I said, what would it look like to go back and look up and see how exactly we spoke on it? Has anything changed? I suppose we'll see if Joel ends up getting out of where he's at. He'll check in. So this is going to be interesting. Might be a little. I do not like to watch myself on video. I don't know if some of you have that same issue. I don't like to go back and watch the videos. I don't like to do the editing. But so mind my face because this might be a little cringeworthy to me. However, I'll go through it. I'm going to do a little commenting on it. If anyone's out there, like, subscribe, share Community Beacon TV. Or if you want to come up, I'll drop the link. If there's something that you want to add, you can either comment or I'll drop the link. Well, we'll see. All right. Let me pull this up. Had a mentor that says just punch in the clock. So it's interesting because I have two different videos. One is 30 minutes. That was from 2023. And then I have one that's like 2.5 hours that of both of us. And that was from 2025. So we'll start with the 2023 episode. And then I doubt I'll go past it, but let's see. We'll see. This is funny because this has our old intro and everything in it. What's funny is if you can hear me, please put a 1 in the chat because I'm doing a whole episode about communication. And I remember one episode when Joel wasn't here and nobody heard what I was saying. But I'm seeing the line. Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully I'm clear. And perhaps at this point I'm just procrastinating. But let's go. What am I doing?
A mindset where you EST with your hosts Michael Seville and Joel Simmons, a channel whose focus is liberty, a place where the lessons discussed and taught will create openings to a more open and freer mindset. A mindset where you may reach the height of your potential and excel. Here are your hosts, Mike and Joel.
What is going on, people? Welcome to Community Beacon. If you're watching this, it's Friday, it's 6:30, and we appreciate you guys for allowing us to be with you. Let's get into it, guys. Mondays, just a little quick housekeeping. Mondays at I've been releasing it earlier. It's actually been coming in the afternoon. What It Takes, guys. Check me out. What It Takes, where I discuss business. Really, a lot of this stuff is just some newer stuff. I really feel like I need to bring back What It Takes. I think that'll be more content stuff I can put on Instagram. It was directly related to real estate. We'll see. Just mindset, man. I'm really loving the mindset, loving communication, loving business. So check me out on Mondays, Michael Seville on all different platforms. Of course, on Wednesdays, we have It Starts With Who, brother?
Starts with me. So we are definitely in the new season. Y'all, please tell me if you like that new intro that we got going on there. I thought it was pretty interesting. Jomer made that. So anyway, see y'all there at 12:30.
Tenacity Foundation, go check it out. And of course, Fridays we culminate with Community Beacon at right around 6:30. And shouts out to the. All right, it sounds like we had a lot going on. I remember It Starts With Me, and I hope the brother does bring that back. But let's go. Let's keep it going. I sped it up. I'm speeding it up so that, if possible, we can get into the second video. If not, we'll see. Perspective, check that out. YouTube channel, Male Perspective, where we talk about, from a male perspective, from a male's point of view, everything that's going on in the world and the community. Real dope show that we got with the different questions. And I'm kind of here and there because the brother just sent me a picture of something that he just finished having, and I immediately got hungry. Like oh, man, it seems like you all eating pretty good over there at the station.
Brother, let me tell you something. That was actually leftovers.
Was it?
Let me tell you. Yeah, man. Yeah, because
this is the first Friday of April. The last, yeah, we can kind of see it. Look at this. So, man, that looked good. Awesome. Guys, so last week we were talking about, we said negotiated, but it's essentially effective communication. I think communication rules the world, okay? If you're able to persuade and or understand other people's point of view, you can go so far. And then the next level was letting people know that you understood where they're coming from. I mean, a lot of us, we can kind of guess and we can kind of figure it out. However, to allow people to know where they're coming from, we kind of get it put together. Look, we got our producer back in the building. Shout out to our producer who just checked in. So last week we kind of left off with, because I've always considered Joe one of the best communicators that I've ever, had the privilege of being around. And he named some great things. So if you haven't checked out our episode for last week, go check it out, where he spoke about one of the things I heard was this silence. Some people call it dynamic silence, but just silence. One of the things he spoke about was having 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should probably listen twice as much as we speak, and not only just listening, but active listening, actually hearing what the other person's saying, because they give off different cues. And he spoke about some nuances that I think a lot of people don't take into consideration. He's talking about the change of pace. He's talking about the silence. I love silence. Silence. I think, especially in sales, one of the things that we go over is that you should actually be talking 20% of the time in sales. And perhaps the majority of it is really asking questions. A lot of it is question asking. So like a recap, asking questions, but 80% of the time, great listeners, great communicators. And I'm not speaking in regards to people who I would call it a little bit more performative, people who speak from stage, pastors, politicians, attorneys. I'm laughing because most attorneys, you can't get them to stop talking. But even though a great attorney normally has a very good pace, ask more questions, and the questions tend to be leading. But let's keep it going. If you're in front of a person, he's talking about the physical changes that appear within the person who's speaking, when certain points are going to be made, and then he took it to the next level, which is saying a prayer to get even more out of it. So that's where we stopped at. And I guess we can kind of pick it up from there, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. And and I think that, and once again, I definitely thank you, because of.
I think Joel is an awesome communicator, and that's why I deferred to him, especially within this episode. I like to get a clear understanding of how he sees the thing, his thought process surrounding having conversations. I've taken a lot from Joel, especially when it comes to listening. So that's why you'll see me defer to Joel in the listening. All right, let's keep it going.
I mean, these words that you're saying, they definitely touch me, and they just let me know that maybe I'm doing something right, and I appreciate that. And it's not to take anything away from you neither, because you have become extremely keen on listening to somebody. You have a way of also waiting until a person has really finished whatever they are saying before you start to speak, and that's natural for you at this point in time.
Yeah,
is it really?
it's and that came from you. Truth be told, I was listening to you. That's funny. He said I have a way of listening, and then I interrupted him. But go ahead.
You and I said, you know what? It's a battle, and sometimes I don't. I'm telling you, my personality is a driver. I don't know if that was if it was nature or nurture, but I know in my family, if you don't make a point and you don't make it strong, especially around the males, you're never going to be heard. You're not going to be left with anything to eat, and that's kind of how we were brought up. You know, in the Caribbean household, the men are just yelling over each other. Like it's a constant battle, and you could be dead wrong, but you're just yelling. And so I came up with that same kind of thought process. And when I decided to become a better speaker, shout out to Toastmasters. One of the best things I learned during Toastmasters was that I got more out of.
Listen to me just go on and on after I already interrupted him. So definitely a work in progress. I've noticed that it was interesting. I was listening to a therapist. I think she's a therapist anyway. She talks a lot about increasing capacity. And one of the things that she mentioned was that just because you self-reflect I think she said that doesn't mean that there could be growth involved, right? So here we're doing Community Beacon. We're talking about listening. I've self-reflected. I've noticed that I express myself in a certain kind of way. And boom, here I am interrupting Joe and going on and on. So just because you have understanding or knowing the knowledge of a thing, that doesn't normally sometimes that does not, or not, I would say more than sometimes, probably oftentimes that does not transform into wisdom and or execution of a thing.
The evaluations than actually giving the speech. I mean, when I'm giving an evaluation, you get more out of it because you learn to listen more. But when to effectively do it in a personal day-to-day conversation, I learned a lot of that from you, brother, because I noticed what you did. I said, you know what, this brother's a great and effective communicator. And I definitely took a lot of that silence of actually listening to the end of the point. You see, I just cut you off right now, right? So I got that from you, brother.
I love it, man. I think that's important in general, just knowing who you are. When we know who we are, we have the opportunity of.
I'm really messing this up. All right, so we cut back in. Hopefully this will rectify at some point in time. Maybe this will be a part 2 of the communication revisited. My apologies, guys. And I pressed stop because it was a part that I kind of wanted to speak on, and now I even forgot because I had to get back on. So let me let this thing go. My apologies.
What we do, what we think all the time. I think that part of what you were leading off on was empathy. When you were referencing the book, you're talking about being an empathic listener, and I think that's important. But I don't think it's the number one thing. I don't think you have to be so empathic. I don't think you have to express empathy so much. I think that empathy is good when used appropriately. And some people don't know how to use empathy appropriately. But simply slowing down to listen to what somebody says and to speak with them versus at them, then I think that right there is notable all by itself. And it's because we all come from different cultures, and we all have different ways of expressing our points of view. So if I were to go inside of the Caribbean culture and I were to speak in a household of 10 guys, from maybe not your family, because some of your family knows me, but maybe somebody else who doesn't know me, then my pathway of speech may not touch them so quickly. I may have to redevelop myself. But on the other hand, and I want to make this clear, that's if I'm testing and trying. If I'm confident in who I am and how I speak, then there still can be a lot of power in being silent. The Dalai Lama, Martin Luther King Jr. had a way to carry his words, to elevate his words, but then he also had a way of being silent. And sometimes when you're so silent, but when you speak, and you speak well, people note that. And they're like, he doesn't say much, but when he speaks, you should listen. And that goes before you. So you got to take the.
I love that point, that not necessarily having to speak, especially in order to, some people think to control the conversation, but only making the points that, making it more concise can make it more powerful. So yeah, that was an awesome point that he brought up.
Vantage points of these different types of views, because I definitely want to talk about that more. You brought that up in the last show.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me. So you want to talk about the speak on that? Because I had speak on that, brother.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so Vantage Point. They made a movie. Early 2000s, maybe 15 years ago or something like that, called Vantage Point, and what's his name? Forrest Whitaker, I think it was, that was in it, and it was it was like this. They told the exact same story, like 6 different ways, and it wasn't boring. It wasn't boring, but they told the exact same story. The only thing that changed was the view, was the, like you said, the POV, the point of view of the individual that told the story. And they literally told the movie 6 different times. They showed you the exact same thing from a different vantage point. And by them doing that, it kept it so interesting because you kept on thinking in your own mind, what did they see? Right. What did they hear? What came? And so you were mentioning on the last show, if I were to walk across the street, you said in sales, many times we want to walk across the street and drag or pull someone back to our side of the street. It's like, hey, this is where it's at. This is where you need to plant your flag. Right. This is what it's all about. But if you walk across the street and you start to see that there's something there, something else that you could not see from your original vantage point. And that's what.
So that part is what we call tactical empathy. If you've ever watched or listened or read the book, Never Split the Difference, is actually right behind me right now. Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss brought up the point of tactical empathy. And that's the ability to see the other person's side. It doesn't mean that you concede your point. That doesn't mean that you agree with them. It just means that you can see where they're coming from. And that's kind of the point the brother's making now. Let's go.
What true communication does. Yeah. It gives you the opportunity to actually go over to the person you're speaking with and stand next to them and start to look at things from their point of view. And that's what listening does for you. That's what the silence is all about too. It's all about attempting to get over there. Like, I need to be over there. I need to have my back to that TV stand right there. I need to be looking at the screen, over Mike's shoulder. And I need to be able to see what he sees because I'm moving and everything. But the way I'm moving and gesturing, it may be coming across to Mike in a total different way.
Right.
Total different way. He could be thinking I'm yelling and I'm not. He could be thinking that I'm passionate and maybe I'm not. He could be thinking anything because of his vantage point. And that's very key in communication.
That happens a lot. Especially when we talk about crossing different cultural and ethnic backgrounds or locations, etc. Like, some people can feel as if and it happens all the time. Unfortunately, a lot of negative things happen because of perceived aggression, looking at someone.
That's so interesting that we're coming up with, and we're talking about it. And then I talked about this perceived aggression. Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, go check him out. He's on YouTube. He's been doing some awesome work. He just recently did, as recent as yesterday, he did a video about, I think it was a video based on a video. He was doing a critique about the perception of Black Gen X men and how they are perceived as threatening or aggressive, so on and so forth, and how they have to manage, how they've learned to manage the room from that vantage point. And it really resonated with me about having to manage a room. So that's so funny that this pops up again. So maybe we'll get into that video too, because I think Dr. T. Hassan Johnson is doing some awesome work. Let's go.
In the eye, when you're hearing I think for Spanish, it tends to be Hispanic and Asian culture, where you don't really look in people's eyes because that's a sign of disrespect, especially if you're younger or you're different statuses, etc. Whereas in other cultures, like, you look at someone dead in the eye. If you don't look at someone in the eye, then they're saying that you're lying, or they can do so. It can be a sign of disrespect. So the fact that you can and
to that point, for our young men that do tend to watch this, or men in general, people in general, in the West, especially Western European values in America, like, you need to look people in the eye. And there's and I had to learn this from the Caribbean, especially as a child. You weren't taught to look adults directly in the eye. So there was some interesting things surrounding me and eye contact that I had to really become aware of, and it's I'm still super aware of it. I'm super hypersensitive to eye contact, so that's interesting as well. And it's not that I'm scared or nervous; it's just something that we didn't do. Huh? So interesting. Let's go.
And then you spoke about the getting loud. Oftentimes in certain cultures, it's there's something in regards to the aggression. Like I know I've been accused a couple of times of, oh, whoa, you're coming off aggressive, and it's not. Oh, you're moving your hands too much. Your voice is intonation, etc. Especially when they're not used to seeing somebody like myself in certain arenas. It can come off with that. And if they're not talking about something, if there's a I don't want to call it conflict, but maybe a disagreement or a misalignment between the two, not exactly understanding each other's points. So the more so of
that's like talking past each other, because I say sometimes we just like I'm just joining the conversation. By the time in sales, especially someone that you meet for the first time, contextually, it could be someone you've known for a long time. They have walked into the room and have already had a thought or a process or a feeling, and you're just joining in on the conversation. That's why it's so important to have that silence to attempt to get that tactical empathy. If it sounds better to you to get empathy, to kind of see another person's perception as much as you can. How can you gain that clarity? You can connect different type of ways. I found that question, silence, etc., helps to speed up that process. Let's keep it rolling.
Of being aware of that. Here's the next thing that I found as well, and this is what I've really been working on. We spoke about this silence as well, is not having to give my state what it is that I'm thinking, or my feelings about something, or even like or giving someone a suggestion. Right? Sometimes people just aren't prepared for it, and you can tell that from the listening side of it. When someone is saying blah blah, saying whatever, yeah, okay. I'm great at okay, or I'm great at okay, you're right, and walk.
That's so dismissive. it wow, how many it's that's super dismissive. So I get it, Chet. I've been working on that. I've noticed it. I've worked on it. And that doesn't mean that you need to put yourself in a conversation where you have to abandon yourself. Like you have to. There's no have to listens here, but just saying, yeah, you're right. So on and so forth. It can come off as being dismissive. I'm watching me talk right now. I'm like, okay, Mike, that's kind of dismissive. Maybe you can interrupt and say like, hey, listen, this is not the time. That might be a better way to do a boundary. That might be that's probably something I would do now. Like, this is not the right time. Maybe I might ask a question. Are you looking to be helped, hugged, or heard? Right. So that's changed a little bit for me. But yeah, that was super dismissive. And sometimes it is good to say like, you're right, especially if they want to argue with you. All right, let's keep it moving.
Walking away from it. I have no problem. It used to be a problem for me because I wanted to get my point across, so to speak. At this, I've reached a point in time where it's just I don't even have to get my point across. If people aren't being receptive, then they're not being receptive. And it's not that I want them to walk down into a negative pathway, but if people aren't open to hearing what it is that I have to say, and I've heard you say this before, where you say, brother, I can just place it here. What you do with it is up to you. But sometimes they don't even allow me the space to place things there. It's just like, this is the way it is. And
that's so interesting. I'm always working on myself. I'm at a point now. So this is back in 2021 or 2023. I'm not sure what. I'd have to look at it again. You can honestly tell there was something going on where I had become aware of people not listening. And I believe that what you see on the outside is indicative of what's going on the inside. So not being able to listen, not being able to receive specifically, as far as the listening part. So receive overall, or accepting. Acceptance is probably something that I was looking at there. So now, like what makes what I have to say? Here's a great question that I could ask myself. What makes what I have to say so important, as opposed that it would take away from me connecting with the person in front of me? Probably nothing, if I were to think about it, right? I think going into something and now with understanding that connection is probably the most important thing. However, there's certain things that I probably have on my mind, different agendas that I have, whether that's to support, to help, to problem solve, etc. However I was wired, so to speak. So one of the great experiments that we run, or I run while having a conversation, is if I can identify my personal agenda, my self-interest, like what is it? And I name it out. I may name it in my mind. This is my self-interest. I want to help this person. This is my self-interest. I wanted to guide this person a certain direction. And then the question, but however, ultimately connection is what I want. Trust, possibly. Acceptance is what I want. And so now my question to the person, now I immediately can go into question mode, probably recap what they said, and then go into question mode to reveal a little bit more about them. So yeah, that's a lot of this is definitely changed somewhat in the last year or so, for sure. All right, let's keep it going. This is not bad. I'm enjoying this.
I think Henry Ford said, whether you think it's right or whether you think it's wrong. No, is that what he said? Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. But I say whether you think it's wrong or whether you think it's right, you're right, and how you come across.
Right. He who says he can and he who says he can't are both right.
Right.
And that's a powerful statement, and also about placing it. So here I want to build on what you're saying, because I think that this is like a great conversation, especially in communication, and you were mentioning something about, we both have kind of gone back and forth with cultural differences and things like that. And it took me a long time to really understand the cultural differences between me and my wife. My wife is Cuban, and if I speak to any Cuban male, which I got a lot of them that I work with, I'll say, man, I got a Cuban wife. They're like, oh man, you know what I'm talking about, and if I say, if I speak with my wife, she'll be like, well, you got a Cuban wife. What am I supposed to do about that? And it just means that, because her level of speech, her normal level of speech is elevated.
Okay.
And that's normal. That's just always normal, and it just is what it is. And a lot of Cubans, Cuban women, they take that in, and they like, a lot of Cuban women that I have met, and a lot of Cuban men that I've met, they take that in. They're like, yeah, that's true. So anyway, my whole point is that you were mentioning men and how they'll be yelling and screaming in order to get their point across. When you were talking about the Caribbean nature, and Cuba is a Caribbean land. So sometimes you need to get that word through. So it's not just the listening part in the communication, it's also the deliverance.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's really important. One of the things that I mentioned maybe in the last show was that there was a point in time where I knew how to either be extremely calm and collected, or I knew how to like go blackout crazy type of individual, but I didn't know any middle grounds. Many people have the difficult part of their communication is the middle ground. How do I maintain calm, but how do I be direct? How do I be passionate? How do I be strong? How can I be bold, and then not take away from me being maybe empathic, or maybe me being compassionate? How do I do that? And that sometimes that can be the tricky part, because sometimes people are very bold, and when they're very bold, they stay that way, and sometimes you won't allow somebody else to enter into the room with you and have a conversation. And many times people who are unsure about themselves, or who are very sure about who they believe you are, they will disengage. And that's what you were just talking about. They will disengage from the conversation, not for the same purposes that you were talking about, but they will disengage because they don't want this argument. They don't want this fight. They were there yesterday. They were there with somebody else last week. They've always been there. They've never liked it. And you know what? Forget about it. It's not even worth it. some of these people need to have those conversations if they're in some type of bond with each other, friends, husband and wife, son and father, daughter and mother.
I guess I don't think we necessarily need to have the conversation. Because when people aren't ready to receive, then they're not ready to receive. Right. So I think you don't necessarily have the conversation, but you can connect in some kind of way, whatever that looks like. I think it's important to stay in connection during a conversation more so than to have the conversation, if that makes sense. And it makes sense to me.
Etc. And they need to have these conversations. But because the daughter or the son looks at the father and they're like, no, that's it. I throw my hands up. They are already exiting out of the relationship inside of their mind because they've allowed themselves to be defeated in that communication, in that environment, in that very moment. What do you say?
No, absolutely, brother. Like you got to think. And then, and this is what we spoke about Chris Voss briefly. His company's called the Black Swan. The Black Swan is the information, he defines it as the Black Swan, and why he calls it the group is because in every negotiation or conversation, etc., there are biases, there are past experiences, there are something that possibly that this person's not telling you across the room. And they're making decisions, or whether or not they continue to engage, or like you mentioned, to shut down.
To be succinct, you're joining a conversation a person is already having, whether it was their feelings, whether it was an actual experience that they had, like you're joining in on that conversation. And you may know this person for years. You may have an inkling or an ideal, but there could always be a possible black swan. Someone could also be talking to them, right? So the best thing at this point is attempt to not, like I said, not necessarily to force a conversation. It would be nice if people were able to talk when you wanted to talk or on your time. However, that's not necessarily the case. To stay in connection doesn't necessarily need for a person to talk. Sometimes you can stay in connection with the person, even though they don't want to stay in connection with you, which is a whole different ball game, but that will not happen today. Let's go.
Now they're making a lot of these decisions based on all those that past information. This is not the first time this person has come into actor. So we as human beings, we quickly have judgment on each other. There's a 7 seconds. People normally judge people in the first 7 seconds of the conversation. So we quickly have, and that's how we survived as for so long, because we had to identify what was danger or what was not danger. So we quickly draw these
especially people who are people pleasers, hyper vigilant people who have been used to having to caretake in their minds. They caretake others. So they're always looking. Pay attention. Passive aggressive people who are scared or who are in fear, they're always looking to see how the other person is going to react, or possibly, would like to react. So definitely important.
What would be the word for it? These viewpoints on certain things based on past information. Like, you might not know why you dislike this person, but it's because they have a red hat on. And when back in the 7th grade, someone with a red hat pushed you. And that information is logged into your system. So now when you're having this conversation with this person, that kind of starts to come to a point. But then we also talk about the last thing that book talks about. The last, oh my gosh, the last impression is a lasting impression. So this is when you come into a conversation with someone, you have a lot of.
Super important. The lasting impression. If you do not, like, we don't have to finish and end a conversation in that moment. We don't have to have a conclusion sought. I imagine court is the only place where you want a final judgment, but 90% of the time, you don't have to have a final judgment in that spot. There are times when you can table the matter. You can come back to it. It's important to whoever it is to have that connection and a lasting impression, regardless of how it seems like it's going in the directions. Trust me.
Preconceived notions, or maybe you have some type of emotional feelings towards this person for whatever reason. And then this person can, by through listening to you, and coming off in a different way may change your mind. This is one of the things that they said Oprah did with her guests, is that no matter if they agreed or they disagreed and there was something going on, by the time the show ended, she sent them home feeling good. Whether that was off camera, so that a lot of them would come back, although they didn't agree originally. So it's important for us to pay attention. This is the effective communication part. This is the effective communication part of listening and going back and forth, and even seeing when people are starting to shut down by something that you may have said that may perhaps, and I think oftentimes we don't mean to. Well, I've seen some people who are intentionally out here hurting people. But I think people who are coming into a conversation with the best intent, most people come with the best intentions.
Yeah. Well, I like what you just said there, because I do think that some people intentionally, do or hurt. They intentionally
hurt people. Hurt people. Hurt people. Let's go. Let's keep it going.
Are looking to hurt someone else. Some people are looking for revenge. Some people are looking to get even. Some people want their voice heard, and they're not really concerned what other people do, say, feel, or react. So not sure. I was thinking about something. I was going somewhere, and so here, this is what I want to say.
All right,
There was something there. I wish the brother was on, because he probably wouldn't remember anyways. But I'm sure there was like something that crossed his mind. Probably an instance.
I'm sorry. Anna complimented me, and it really threw my brain for a loop real quick. And I'm normally better than that, so I apologize. But that's why it's so important. Like yourself, myself, even Anna. Those of us that are in the world that have this desire to help others, this desire to communicate, this desire to grow and to become stronger, it's imperative that we start to learn more about our own communication style, our own selves, so that we can approach other people in a better way. Because now, if I get it, not in front of everybody, I'm still working on me, I'm not the best. But now if I get in front of some people that are attacking me or attacking other people, I have words that I'm able to use. And I'm not saying I'm so eloquent with my words. I don't have a lot of big words, a lot of 15, 20 letter words that I can use at this point in time. But what I'm saying is that I have the ability to express myself in such a way. I understand different levels of tone, which I think we'll probably get into later. And I have that ability to make impact with few or many words. And it's served me well when I've come in front of individuals who desired my downfall. And I'd love to give you an example in the next episode.
Perfect, guys. Listen, we appreciate you all checking in. This is a great conversation. Communication is so imperative, guys. So next episode, we'll definitely be getting into the tone.
That was good, man. This is not about perfection. Like this, I'm glad Joel ended with that, where it was like, I can have impact, I can express myself. This is about expression. This is not about getting everything that you want. This is not about getting people in step. This is about effective communication. This was an awesome episode. This wasn't that bad. It's interesting. The place that let me see if I can stop this. Yeah, the place that I was looking at, going back, we do have a 2.5 hour episode. I probably won't do it today. I really messed up some of this recording. Hopefully at the end post, we can kind of put it all back together. Other than that, love to hear your thoughts, your comments. I've seen growth in myself. I'm watching it and I'm like, man, I love the time that we've taken to get to where we are, right? To be our aligned and attuned selves. And I'm hoping you all are doing the same. If not, you can always join us on this journey. Community Beacon TV. Check us out. We're on YouTube. I'll have this up in about, I don't know. I'll get it done sometime during this weekend. I might start doing more of these reactions. This was fun. Okay, so next time, see you next time. As long, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, man. You all have a good one. Peace.